Have you ever told yourself you're in control, only to catch your mind wandering back to that same craving, that same rush of desire, no matter how hard you try to resist? What if the battle isn't about willpower at all, but something deeper, something most of us never see coming? Baruch Spinoza, a thinker who saw the world in a way few do, once wrote, "We do not desire a thing because we find it good, but we find it good because we desire it." At first glance, that might sound like a twist of words, but stay with me. What he's saying is that our desires aren't just reactions to the world, they shape how we see the world itself. You probably recognize that stubborn feeling of being right, even when part of you knows you're not. Many of us cling to familiar ideas because they feel safe, even when they keep us stuck. Think about the last time you craved something. Maybe it was a distraction, a person, a rush of validation. In the moment, it felt necessary, almost inevitable. But later, with a little distance, you might have wondered, why did that have such a hold on me? That tension between what feels urgent in the moment and what you know, deep down, isn't serving you, is where the secret battle happens. Remember when you were a kid and believed something completely, only to realize later it wasn't true? Maybe it was about how the world worked, or who you thought you had to be. That moment of realizing you'd been fooling yourself is uncomfortable, but it's also the beginning of real growth. Spinoza's insight is that we're all doing this, all the time, not just with big beliefs, but with our desires. We convince ourselves that what we want is what's best, even when it leads us in circles. Here's the thing, desires aren't just random. They come from somewhere. Spinoza saw them as natural forces, like currents in a river. You can't blame the river for flowing, but you can learn to navigate it. The problem isn't the desire itself, it's that we mistake it for something personal, something that defines us. We say, "I want this," as if it's a choice, when often it's just an old pattern playing out. Let's say you're stuck in a loop of chasing fleeting pleasures, scrolling, snacking, seeking attention. On the surface, it feels like you're making decisions, but underneath, it's more like autopilot. Spinoza would say those desires are running through you, not from you. And that's the key. When you see them as forces passing by, rather than truths you have to obey, something shifts. This isn't about suppressing what you feel. It's about understanding where those feelings come from. Imagine standing by the ocean. A wave knocks you over, and for a second, you're at its mercy. But if you see it coming, you can brace yourself, or even dive under it. The wave still has power, but you're no longer surprised by it. That's the difference between being ruled by desire and learning to move with it. You might be thinking, okay, but how? It starts with noticing. Next time a craving hits, pause for just a second and ask, what's really driving this? Not to judge it, just to see it. Maybe it's boredom, loneliness, or an old habit. The moment you do that, you're no longer completely swept up. You're starting to see the current instead of just being carried by it. This cracks open a truth many of us don't see until we're deep in the struggle. The battle with lust, or any overpowering desire, isn't just about saying no. It's about understanding why we say yes in the first place. And that journey isn't a straight line. It's a winding path with 3 distinct phases, each revealing something new about ourselves and how we relate to our desires. In the beginning, everything seems simple. We see our desires as either good or bad, something to indulge or suppress. This is where most of us start. Black and white thinking. Lust is the enemy, and willpower is the shield. You might be someone who resists change at first, believing that sheer determination is enough to overcome any temptation. We tell ourselves, if I just try harder, I'll beat this. But life isn't that straightforward. The first phase is like standing at the edge of a forest, seeing only the trees right in front of us, unaware of the tangled paths ahead. Then comes the confusing middle. This is where things get messy. We start to realize that willpower alone isn't enough. Temptations return, sometimes stronger than before, and we feel stuck in a cycle of guilt and frustration. Baruch Spinoza, the philosopher who deeply studied human desires, called this the stage where we're slaves to our passions. We react without thinking, like a knee-jerk response to hunger or anger. Lust in this phase isn't just a choice. It feels like an automatic pull, something we can't control. Most of us feel uneasy during transitions like this because we're forced to confront the gap between who we are and who we want to be. Spinoza saw challenges not as obstacles to avoid, but as necessary friction that shapes us. The middle phase is where we learn that desire isn't the problem, it's our relationship to it. Slowly, a new clarity emerges. We begin to notice subtle shifts in ourselves. You may catch yourself pausing before reacting lately, or questioning why a certain desire feels so urgent. This is where Spinoza's contrast between knee-jerk reactions and thoughtful responses becomes real. Instead of being driven by impulse, we start to respond with awareness. We see that lust, like all desires, is a signal, not a command. Command. It's not about eradicating the feeling, but understanding it. We start noticing how our environment, our habits, and even our thoughts feed into these urges. And with that awareness, we gain a new kind of control. This journey isn't unique to lust. It's the same with any desire that feels overpowering, whether it's for food, validation, or distraction. The tough middle phase is where most people give up because it's uncomfortable. But Spinoza would argue that this discomfort is where growth happens. It's where we move from being passive victims of our impulses to active participants in our own lives. We begin to ask better questions. What is this desire really about? What am I trying to fill? The shift isn't dramatic. It's in the small moments, choosing to step back when the pull is strong, recognizing patterns before they take over, or simply being kinder to ourselves when we slip up. We start to see that mastery isn't about perfection, it's about understanding. And that understanding changes everything. Through this discomfort, we begin to see the cracks in what we once thought was solid ground. It's unsettling, like realizing the map you've been following is missing whole sections. But here's the thing. Those cracks let in light. They show us where we've been clinging to ideas that don't quite fit, where we've been forcing ourselves into shapes that were never meant to hold us. And while that realization might sting at first, it's also the beginning of something new. This is where the real work starts. Not the kind that drains us, but the kind that slowly, gently, reshapes how we move through the world. You'll likely find daily decisions coming easier as this shift takes hold. It's not that life suddenly gets simpler, but the weight of old assumptions begins to lift. Choices that once felt paralyzing now have a little more space around them. Maybe you notice yourself pausing less over what used to tie you in knots. The opinions of others, the need to have everything figured out. the fear of picking the wrong path. Those old frustrations don't bother them as much. Not because you've become indifferent, but because you're starting to trust your own footing. This isn't about arriving at some grand answer. It's about noticing the small moments where you feel a little freer, a little lighter. Like when you catch yourself laughing at something that would have annoyed you weeks ago, or when you realize you're no longer waiting for permission to take up space. These are the signs that something is shifting beneath the surface, and the more we pay attention to them, the more they grow. Together, we discover that growth rarely happens in straight lines. It's messy, full of doubling back and unexpected detours. But even the missteps teach us something. Maybe you try on a new way of thinking, only to find it doesn't quite fit. That's okay. It's all part of the process. The Barnum effect shows us how easily we can convince ourselves that vague, universal truths are deeply personal revelations. But here's the difference. This time, you're not just accepting what sounds good. You're learning to distinguish between what resonates and what just sounds familiar. Many notice old frustrations don't bother them as much when they stop seeing them as personal failures. It's like untangling a knot you've been pulling at for years, only to realize it was never yours to untie. That's the paradox of letting go. The things we thought were holding us together were often the very things keeping us stuck. And when we release them, we don't fall apart. We finally get to stand up straight. This is where Baruch Spinoza's insight comes in, like a quiet revelation. Freedom, he reminds us, isn't about breaking chains or escaping something. It's about understanding, really understanding, what's been shaping us all along. And with that understanding comes a kind of release, like finally taking off shoes that never quite fit. You didn't realize how much they were pinching until you felt the ground beneath your bare feet. Together, we discover that the most profound shifts often come from the simplest realizations. It's not about adding more to our lives, but about shedding what no longer serves us. And in that space, we find room to breathe, to move, to be. The journey doesn't end here, of course. There will always be new layers to uncover, new ways to grow. But for now, take a moment to appreciate how far you've come. The discomfort that started this journey, it was never the enemy. It was the invitation, and you were brave enough to accept it. The rest is just walking forward, one step at a time, lighter than before.